This is the Digital Formula Podcast, a show about digital transformations, why they fail, and how you can apply the formula to ensure that your transformation program will create the expected results. By aligning your services to your strategy, architect solutions well, and deliver them in an agile fashion.
Hey Mike, how are you doing today?
Hey Rowan, great. Good to see you again.
Yeah, it's been a while, so we need to get better in the habit of producing more podcasts so that our listeners get more content. But
yes, I hear that someone here is very opinionated and has a lot to say.
Oh yeah, that's
probably
true.
Two somebody's.
Who might that be? That's a very interesting question. Yes, but in all seriousness, we're talking about one of my favorite topics. Today we're talking about process intelligence, and I know that you are very interested in looking at definitions and maybe picking it apart. So let me start with a definition of process intelligence that I found on the web, and kudos to Bernard Schaffrick who wrote it. And that is the Forrester definition of the process intelligence market, if you will. And they say, and I will put it in the video so that you can follow it. They say Forrester defines process intelligence software as products that provide analytics about an organization's processes that are operated by humans as well as implemented in IT systems. Process analytics is mainly based on task and process mining capabilities, but not limited to them. Process intelligence software enables decision-making on how to improve process performance. So, Mike, are we done with the podcast now? Because we all agree on that definition and it's so super obvious? Or what are your thoughts on that definition?
Oh, I think we have a lot to decompose and tear apart in that definition. So what I like is the difference between analytics and intelligence. Just because you've analyzed something doesn't mean you are now in a position to take any better action on it, right? So that's kind of what I like. What I don't like, and I understand Forrester has a certain angle on this. They mention the word software a couple times. Defines process intelligence software as products. Process intelligence software enables decision making. Well, I would say that good practices and thinking about the information of the kind of decision you need to make and backing up from there is kind of the overall important approach. And the software helps you make that decision based on the data you might decide to prioritize to collect, how you might interpret that data, and who you're trying to interpret that data for, right? So I think it goes beyond software.
I agree. Software is a tool, but you also have to see it in the context that Bernard wrote it, because obviously they were looking at software vendors in their wave, and people are looking for software to buy. But I think the takeaway is, and I agree with you, it's not the software doing the decision making or doing even the analysis for you. The software is a tool that helps you doing those things. And when I look at it, what I don't like that much on this definition is, well, when it says mainly based on task and process mining, but not limited to them. And then they didn't give an answer, right? So when you download the report and look at it, it's basically around this. In my mind, I see different need that people have. And I put it, and I will also add a graphic to the show notes. I put it on a continuum, if you will, right? I think the big thing and the big interest in process intelligence is people need to get visibility into what they're doing. And in the past, that was just not the case. They said, oh yeah, we got a process for this. And then they pointed you to a diagram, right? But they really don't know what they've done. And then some people might say, oh yeah, there's business intelligence for this. There you see it, right? Now we end up in that whole conversation around lagging and leading indicators. And the majority of BI stuff that I've seen is lagging indicators. How many widgets have we produced? How many shipments did we have? And these type of things, there's no prediction towards the future. I think that process intelligence should also have that predictive character.
Yeah, it should really help people make better decisions at the end of the day, right? And the convenient thing about the process entry point into this whole intelligence discussion is that processes can touch so many different views of the architecture, right? So, and I don't mean to speak like a nerdy architect, business architect here, but if we're mapping a process, right, we might naturally ask, instead of just boxes and diamonds on a screen on a page, well, what if we could enrich that with the applications needed to carry out that process and the data needed to power those applications, or the data, just the data, not tons and tons and reams of data, just the data to help us give us the information needed to make a better decision in the context of that process. And that's where business intelligence in general comes in. It just so happens now that process intelligence is helping us shape what business intelligence, the better use cases for business intelligence.
I think you bring 2 points up. One is, I agree, there's more than a process, right? But, and we will talk about that. Process analysis, which I think is the second step on that continuum, have visibility, do an analysis, and then decide, and then actually do changes in your execution, do different things, right? And have the loop, right? I think that's the bigger picture behind it. But process analysis is also limited, right? And it's limited obviously into the steps that somebody does. So process intelligence, that's a question that we should raise to our audience. And by the way, there's tons of nerds listening to this, so don't be afraid of being nerdy. Should process intelligence aim for more than just process? And in one of my favorite podcasts, and I'm a little bit biased which one it is, I put a link in the show notes, we were talking about the concept of enterprise mining, right? Which I think is something that would be the next step after process intelligence, because, and maybe the hook is, with process intelligence and process mining in specific, there's a new quality that came to that field of process analysis. And the new quality is, now it's data driven. It's not just, bring your SMEs into a room and they tell you whatever they want to tell you. I remember one conversation with a client. He said, we should have changed that ERP system 24 years ago. I said it 24 years ago and nothing has changed, right? So a very biased opinion. And by the way, that gentleman might be right, in that situation. They might have changed the ERP system 25 years ago. But it's a bias. So what you see is, and the way how I envision that is like a Venn diagram, right? You have, on the one hand side, you have that subjective, human-focused analysis. And we talk about the different things that people did in the past. And consulting organizations made a lot of money from, by the way. And then on the other side, which is the new quality, you have a data-driven approach to it. And I think with those new tools, you get another dimension of it. But I also agree with what you said, that you're missing out aspects of an architecture in your analysis. So you need more than that. Does that sound reasonable to you? Do you agree? Or
It does. And I like the Venn diagram because bringing together the human focused and data driven approach is reality. It is the two elements we need to think of in terms of the data may tell us one thing, but where are the pain points with the humans in all of this? And how are we using that data for better intelligence to solve those user problems? And when we say human focused, my thoughts pretty quickly go to human factors, user usability and user experience, whether that is a customer experience or an employee experience or a partner experience. So, for example, one of the things that we have done in a past engagement is to say, hey, where does it hurt everybody? We could broad user experience research. Where does it hurt? What is the problem getting your job done? Right? Asking the people who are in the weeds every day. And then we kind of took that data and built personas and use cases and kind of official pain points. And then we said, let's align that with the processes, because there's tons and tons of processes in every organization. And in trying to figure out where to even start, because to optimize a process and automate it is an expensive decision. Because if you do the wrong one and you don't fix the people's pain points, what have you done in the end, right? And so we use that information to really sharpen where we should start from, which process we should even start on from a prioritization perspective.
Yep.
And then we might ask the questions, okay, now that we kind of know the cluster of processes to start on, how are these things related? And now we know these are the ones we really need to drill into and do those expensive, and they are not cheap sometimes, the data mining operations to go collect that data and cleanse that data and automate the display of that data into a process, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, we're going to talk about that part, the technical part, in the second half of this show. The example makes sense, right? It raises two aspects or two thoughts in me. One is this could by itself be an example of a traditional process analysis approach, right? You talk to humans. When you think about the Venn diagram, that's the furthest right, it's the human focused thing. But the second thought that I have was, and I agree with that, you need to figure out what are the things that you want to know. And you will see that when we talk in the second half about the approach that I propose for a process mining project. You need to figure out hypothesis, right? Why does our execution stink, right? So the first thing is you talk with people and you identify those pain points to say, okay, this is the area that we want to look at. We're all cool. Our finance system works perfectly fine. Invoices will be paid. It's all great, but we have an issue with that vendor management system, So now obviously the focus of your analysis would focus naturally more on the first part of a procure-to-pay process, for example. The other thing that I think is important in this context, and this is where the Venn diagram overlaps, I think neither of those two ellipses, human-driven, human-focused, data-driven, can exist without the other. So to your example, right? Yes, you talk to people and they tell you this stinks, right? Do you believe it? No. You want to see some form of evidence for this because the human could have told you whatever they want to tell you. We should have changed our ERP system 24 years ago. And vice versa. I had clients that just said, oh yeah, here you have our data, literally our data of the last 10 years. Go figure, right? Without talking to us, right? Which is also futile, right? Because then you're looking not only for the needle in the haystack, no, you got 10 haystacks and you're looking for the needle. So either way, there needs to be an overlap between data and humans. And I think none of the techniques that we see in that field that we're going to talk about in the next few minutes can live without the other. Does that make sense for you, Mike?
It does. It does. One angle I'll drill into a little bit more is you mentioned that the humans might have what I would call a bias, I think is what you're getting at. They might have bias, and that might throw off might say, hey, let's get some evidence around this. I think that the more important question, because if you do human research, user experience research in a way that collects multiple viewpoints from different angles, you can kind of tease out that bias and throw it out, right, from a statistical standpoint.
To a degree, yes.
To a degree, yes. And so I think that the more powerful use case, though, is humans are just going to talk in generalities from their own limited experience and not the details. It's the details we got to get down to, and the systems and tracing transactions through is a pretty efficient way to get to the detail behind a general. Oh, I think we got a rotating chair problem. Like people just, recruitment's a real mess around here.
I agree, and that's a nice segue to the rest of the graphic that will be in the show notes. Because when we take those two ellipses, the Venn diagram, and put it on top of each other. And now you can choose if we start from the left or from the right. There are some analysis techniques that have been successful in the past, so it's not that we're inventing process analysis as a new discipline or a new field here, right? But I think what we see is, and let me start from the left because it's easier to read from left to right. What do we see? The first thing is an attempt that's out there for decades, is business intelligence, right? The first idea of make it visible what happens. And sometimes, and I spoke about leading and lagging indicators, sometimes the lagging indicators are just enough. Hey, my data center just went down. Oh, my warehouse is burning. You want to know that, right? So no thing there. But business intelligence, and you will see it in the graphic, business intelligence is also something that is not process, right? So how do you get through the noise to say, yeah, burning warehouses are bad, but what does that mean for my process analysis? Oh, it's an anomaly, just take it out. It doesn't help me finding patterns, right? The second thing, which is very close to it, BI groups try to do some execution monitoring, right? Mm-hmm. And tools, runtime tools have that built in. And the challenge is that the people who implement it need to know what to look for. And they don't necessarily look for the right things, right? The typical example that I see is where you have metrics in system implementations like how many trainings did we give? How many participants did we train? That's not important. Not at all. The important question is, do those 200 people that you made sit in a classroom for 3 days, do they know 6 months later what they're supposed to do and how do they perform? That's the actual question behind it. But nobody picks it up because you have that project attitude. Yeah, we did it. Check, 200 people trained. Done. Right?
Yeah.
And then when you move on further to the right, you see the topic that we're going to talk soon about. You see process and task mining, the new shiny thing on the hill, which obviously gives you more insight because it calculates things differently and it gives you opportunities that you haven't had before, or you just could achieve with a lot of effort. And then when you go further to the right, you see, you mentioned it, have the human idea behind it, but get the evidence. You see things like Six Sigma, right? Where you have statistic nerds looking at deviations and calculate the heck out of it, which was pretty hot, say 20 years ago, right? In the context or in combination with lean, which is less data driven, more, let's find the 35 million ways of waste that we have in that process, which obviously helps a lot, if you can take away the bottlenecks and whatnot. And then, obviously, as we said, your example, the interviews, right? Just ask people and get their suggestion. I think one topic that is new, besides the mining exercise, the new quality is something that stretches the Venn diagram. And that is a skill that analysts typically did not have in the past. And that's data storytelling, to say, what do I see? Not only sifting out through a big pile of data, but figuring out the story to tell and then being able to put that in a dashboard that tells the story, right? And that might be an episode in itself, how to create a good dashboard. But at the end of the day, what do you want? You want to have data being sliced in a way that it's understandable and that you can make a decision based on it to say, oh yeah, I see this, that evolves into that, and I don't like it, and now I have to change it in that way, and let's run it for another month or two and see if we have a change. Does that make sense?
I think you and I both know the person who might tell that data storytelling story. It's Mr. Larry Marine, our director of user experience at LSA Digital, who frequently is frustrated with dashboards that don't help end users make a decision. They don't help people really get to the point. How do we tell a story and how do we give them an outcome? How do we paint the picture for them to make a decision and cut through all the noise? He talks about that a lot. So that's kind of a user experience, application of user experience in and of itself.
Yeah, and again, we might have a separate episode about that. We had Larry on the show a couple of episodes ago. So for those of you who haven't listened to him, he sits in a nice greenhouse doing that. So you can watch plants while we listen to him. But time flies. We're already 20-ish minutes in. So let's do a little break. And when we come back, I'd like to talk about, how do I tackle a process mining project or a process intelligence project? Because we do have a 6-step process, without spoiling too much, a 6-step process. And I'd like to walk through this so that you, dear listeners, have a little takeaway on this. And we'll see you after this.